21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
I grew up kind of with limited means. Do you understand what I mean by that? We didn't have much. And so I have this perspective in my mind that, when you kind of feel that way, you start to believe that money might be the answer. Like if I was to tie myself to something of value, then I would be of value. But that couldn't have been further from the truth in my experience. And it wasn't until, when I was a young man, was hanging out with a group of people. One half went to the gym and the other half didn't make it. And in the gym, that's when I first found out that that was the first place where pain had purpose, and that I started to cultivate a little belief in myself. And I think that was the first muscle that I ever gained in my life. And the other good thing that I started to cultivate there was discipline, but I didn't really understand what that meant or the value of it. And the product of discipline was I became fitter, I became more confident, but the core or the kind of genesis that cultivated that discipline was keeping that small promise to myself that said I was going to go to the gym at 6:00 in the morning. And as those days started to align, that became the evidence that I was a disciplined person. That was a huge monumental shift for me, changed the direction of my entire life. And, I still couldn't get that thing out of my mind that if I was to achieve some type of financial reward, that my life would be good. And I just so happened to bump into some guys in this gym that they were walking the walk. They were living the life that I desired to live. And I thought it was about their nice car and their cool shoes. But the truth was, there was a self-belief that they had about themselves that I desired to have. And, it wasn't before long that I was invited into their business model. So we raised money for public companies. Felt super exciting at the time, 22 years old, sitting on a phone for 12 hours a day, cold calling companies, They didn't pay me $1 to be there, but they didn't have to because they were filling my tires. They were allowing me to borrow their belief because that I really didn't have in myself at that point. And they said all the things I needed to hear. They said, "You got everything it takes, kid." And so I would have ran through a brick wall for them, and I did. And within a couple of years, they weren't wrong. I had a big house, a beautiful wife, a boat at the dock, a Porsche in the garage, 2 beautiful children. And you would believe on paper that life was feeling fulfilling, but I never felt more empty. I never felt more disconnected. But the thing that maintained through that whole kind of story was that fitness. I'd love to look back on my life and say it was faith that was my anchor, but fitness helped me better understand faith in the future. And while I was in that business, God stepped in and had bigger and better plans than I had for myself. And thank God I might have never left that industry because there was no end to what I would have pursued, because I thought the answer to the riddle that I thought would be solved, I thought it would be solved with money. And couldn't be further from the truth. So one day, sitting in the office, I have a call center with a bunch of guys on the phones, a young lady sitting before me, doing our insurance. And I look past her to the door and I see the guys walk in. FBI agents in coats that says FBI. I never saw anything like that in person. Thought it only was in the movies. They sat me down. They told me the good news. They said, "Kid, you're not the target of the investigation. You're the subject, which means we're not interested in you. We just need you to cooperate against the only guys that ever believed in you. And you'll be all set. Probation, keep your house, keep your stuff." And that just didn't stomach right with me. And it was a hard decision to give consideration to trading my freedom for their belief in me. And I made a decision not to. But with that decision, I was instantly indicted and taken to Philadelphia, where I was convicted of conspiracy to commit securities fraud. And at the time, I had co-defendants. I didn't have the capital. I was just a young kid. I didn't have the capital to stay in the fight. And so with that decision, they put me in federal prison, 1,000 nights away from my kids and my wife. And, you know, it was no joke. There was a lot of consequences to that. And I didn't end up at like the fun place with the attorneys and the low security place. I was at the high consequence facility. And with that came an incredible amount of growth, because I went from having a really good life to living in a cage, and so many lessons in that. I think adversity doesn't create strength, it reveals it. So I didn't even know that I had the capacity to push through that. It was more of a mental game than anything else. And there's a lot of crazy things that are going on around me. And you know what I did? One of the things that was most effective for me is I lived every day like Groundhog Day. I just tried to do the same exact thing. And for me, it was read a book, go to the gym, eat, read a book, go to the gym, eat. And, there was also this like pain of being away from your family, obviously. My children are growing up and I'm not in their lives. They don't know where I am. They think I'm in the army or something because they visit me. I'm on an army base. But in time, my time comes to an end. I walk down my days one by one until I was released. And when I was released to a federal halfway house. I thought everything would be perfect. But the day I walked out of prison, I had more anxiety than the day I walked in. I was just weighed down with shame and guilt. And I felt like I had two black eyes. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like there was a snake around my chest just gripping me. And what was going on is I had done my time, but I had not maybe reconciled with myself and the community how this impacted me. Because some of the things that I talked about earlier is that I had attached my identity to money, something that could be taken away in a second. And at this point, I had nothing again. But I had the silver lining to that is that I did have a new identity. And the identity was I can persevere through anything. I knew if I could get through what I just got through, it gave me a new confidence. It wasn't like pride, it was like proof. And that allowed me to, in some ways, be very bold and have conviction about the direction of my life, but at the same time, having no direction of my life. And I had a 3-year ban from the securities industry. I had nothing to do. So I went straight back to the gym and straight back to the place that's kind of started it all. And I didn't know it at the time because I felt a sense of isolation. I didn't want to face people. I didn't know how to articulate what has going on. It wasn't like, 10 years later where I have a great story to tell, because it turned into a great story. At the time, it was really difficult to even articulate it with somebody in the eye. But I went back to the gym. Instantly, I found out that I had a few people rooting for me, and I didn't know what I was going to do next, because as a child, I really struggled development. So I had all the ABC alphabet soup of learning disabilities, and I was good at something. So I only believed I would be good at one thing. I never knew that there was transferable skills that I was learning in that process, even though it cost me incarceration. And so I got a phone call from a good friend, a real estate guy. I knew a lot of guys that were affluent guys, and I didn't even want to talk to them because I didn't have dollar to my name. But they called me and they asked me if I would help this guy get in shape. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. I felt like I didn't see that as an option for me. But they asked me again, and I started to meet the guy at the gym, and I started to show up for him. And there was something in that was different than a monetary trade for my previous career. I was showing up for Sam in a unique way. And I was supporting him in doing something that maybe he couldn't have done on him alone. And it's lit a little spark in my heart. It's the first time that I felt I was truly serving others. and I wasn't getting paid a nickel for it, but I started to feel of value in a way that I never experienced before. And I'm incapable of doing anything a little bit. So soon I open a gym. Everybody in my life at this time is struggling with their health. And it wasn't just uh, they weren't out of shape because they were lazy or uninformed. They were alone in it. And it wasn't before long, one of these guys asked me to start making their meals. So take a step back, since I'm 25 years old, I'm always grilling up these same 30 meals at my house. And every Sunday, and I think that, at the time it was because I want to look better, feel better, perform better. But the truth was, I liked the control of it, I think, at that age, because I didn't feel like I was in control of anything. But somebody asked me if I'd make their meals. I told them no, because I felt like I was above it and below it all at the same time. But they asked again, and I went in my garage. I cooked a box of chicken and yams, boxed it up, drove it to the guy's house, banged on the door, and I knew on the other side of the door that he did have all the resources in the world, but he didn't have his health. And when he opened that, and he was struggling with it, and I know how it made him feel. And when he opened that door and I handed them their box of meals, that was the first time I felt it again. I felt like I was putting this box of food in his hands, and I was earning back a little piece of myself at the same time. I never stopped doing that once until today. The way I deliver my product is different, but it's been a journey. So it was Sam, and then pretty soon I had all these people doing the same thing. And it wasn't like I was like making money. It was people were struggling in my life. So I started making food for them, and I walked with them. It wasn't the food. That's one of the biggest learnings, is that I'm not a great cook. So I would just make chicken and yams. It was me showing up for them. So I'd bang on their door, and I knew they weren't feeling great. So I hit them with a big smile. I meet them with empathy and compassion for where they were. And I developed relationships. And inside of that relationship, I developed the rapport to be honest with them. Because they'd open the door and say, hey, I went to my niece's birthday party last night and I ate half the cake. I had to. And I'd say, well, you had to? I would really try to challenge their beliefs a little bit. And to give credit to my federal prison stint, they put me in a program there called RDAP. And they teach you this process, rational self-analysis. And it's about, metacognition. It's about thinking about your thinking. And they put me into it for a year. So the course was mayhem because of where I was, but the course content was genius. And it allowed me to coach people in a unique way. So before I know it, I'm making 1,000 meals at my house every weekend, breaking every law in the food code. I'm sure of it. On parole, but I'm filling up this old Audi wagon that I had with boxes of meals, and I'm showing up for people consistently. In time, it started to wear on me. I didn't want to be everybody's cook. I was gambling, because at the time I was training people all day during the week and then cooking all day Saturday, delivering all day on Sunday. I haven't seen my kids in 3 years. So this was kind of like, it's a risk. But I was like cultivating more belief, and I was building a little bit of buzz around this thing. And the part that was getting me is I just wasn't enjoying the cooking, the food part. I don't think that's anybody's, well, some people have passion for that. But I do remember vividly one day slamming the trunk on this car and realized that I wasn't delivering meals. I was delivering people a little bit of hope, and they were willing to invest in that. And right away, I just kept doing this because in my mind, I believed if I just did this training and food thing for 3 years, I'd go back to this raising money for companies and all my problems would be answered. And over the course of the next several years, I built a manufacturing facility. These gentlemen that were kind of, I started this personal training studio with these affluent men. And because I wasn't pursuing the same things they were, I was very interesting to them. But at the same time, I had the best attorney, the best real estate guy, the best plumber, the best everybody to kind of, God had somehow put the people in my life, the perfect people in my life at the perfect time to make this possible. And I remember one time one of these guys took me over to this plaza and said, "Hey, Tim, I think that this should be where you plant your flag for your business." And I remember feeling like, wow, Joel thinks I have a business, just cooking in the garage. And at many points in my life, somebody like that, usually a man who's a few steps ahead of me, has come into my life and maybe expanded my vision for what's possible. And there's been a series of them. That's just one. And today I try to do that for others. But that guy built me out a beautiful store. I just knew I was like the fitness guy in town forever. I just knew if I put a protein shake bar, healthy meals in there, that all my friends were going to show up and support me. And guess what? They didn't. But who did show up was general population. And that was where the biggest opportunity was. And it became more evident it wasn't about the meal at the time, because they would sit in and they want to talk. And I created this, I'm a relationship guy. So I created these relationships. And it took me a decade to operationalize that process so I could scale it into a franchise. But it was all about the people. We knew right from the beginning. We called it out. We said, we're everything beyond the meal. We're coaching, we're accountability, we're support. And I think that's what people needed most at that time. And it was really interesting because at that time, the business was blowing up overnight. The food quality was the worst. We didn't answer the phone. We didn't even know how to operate a business. But in time, the right people showed up, and the right kind of opportunities showed up to really evolve the process. I bought this cool book. It's called Traction by Gino Wickman, and it's a startup book, and it's a kind of like a 1% better every single day type process where you're just aggressively auditing your processes, your consumer experience, your team development, your leadership, your communication. And it was like, I just committed to that book, and we just kept growing, and we kept growing. And before we knew it, people started taking interest in what we were doing outside of the state. I had no business doing what I was doing, but I started to open up 2-3 other stores through licensing agreements. I was kind of testing the process because at the time we were projecting what we were doing on social media, so people thought it was interesting and fun. And behind that was work and mistakes and learning process. But we got a couple stores going. Things are looking pretty good. We don't know what we don't know. Things are working because I found operators who were great. And these guys would have been good at anything. So I just thought everybody was going to be amazing, right? So we thought that people are really supporting us. I go to these stores, I'm hearing the same language that we organically made in New York, right? And then it's like, we didn't have the SOPs or the training or the things in place to support that. But what we did have was a strong culture. And the culture was in service of others. So we rise by serving others. And that became kind of the magnet that brought the best people to me. Fast forward, COVID hits, the world shuts down. I'm concerned because the fire department shows up at my store and says that we are non-essential. I don't know if that was the same what's going on in London at the time, but they just started shutting down all businesses. Now, they didn't shut down the liquor store. They didn't shut down the vape shop, but the guy that was trying to serve healthy food in a time of crisis, they wanted to shut down. So I went out there and I just started, I'll be honest with you, I just started lying to him. I said, this is a grocery store, it's a convenience store, it's all the things. And, God must have been on our side that day because they let us slide and they let us stay open, which was great because I had 4 stores. I had a manufacturing facility. I had overhead. I had families who were depending on us manufacturing products so they could have jobs. It's like I felt the weight of the world. I was leveraged. I didn't have a dollar. I was scared to death, and they allowed us to stay open. Just another blessing that was kind of like this small thing. For the first time in our business, things slowed down. So prior to that, it felt like every change was like trying to change the tire in a car going 80 miles an hour. We're like drinking from a firehouse. And it slowed down, but in that was the greatest opportunity because now we could focus on some things that needed to be solved. We could kind of unpack some of the challenges, and identify the biggest opportunities in what we would call our member experience. And in come walking this gentleman. His name is Mark. He was one of the guys in the gym. Mark tells me, I think right now is the time when you should go all in on this. Build out the manufacturing, the supply chain logistics, the technology, legitimize the franchise. So now he's like talking millions, or, just, he was talking about things that were so outside of what I could support at the time. But at the same time, I remember having the same feeling, like, this guy believes I have a real opportunity on my hands. I didn't have the money. This gentleman bought my house from me, my only asset, rented it to me for the next several years until my daughter nearly graduated high school. And I took that money, every dollar I had, every dollar I didn't have, and I went all in. And immediately people were interested in franchising. But as you know, it's highly compliant. There's states, there's registration states, non-registration states, all these things. But I had no shortage of people who were interested. And I was trying to do everything to keep them interested by the letter of the law as much as I could. And we went through this registration process, which my attorney said was going to take 6 months. I had already worked on a lot of the training and ops and, kind of trying to build out, what I thought I needed to kick off a franchise, which was a fraction of what it really takes. But in time, after 2.5 years, I'm sitting in Starbucks, which was my office for 5 years. My attorney calls, and it had taken so long because I had a rocky criminal history, and they held me to the highest accountability when it comes to financials and all the things. But he called me and he shared that I was approved. I remember the tear dripping down my eye. And as soon as that happened, boom, we opened up like a dozen stores the first year. We made every mistake in the book, but we never stubbed our toe twice. We focused on doing this. I was the marketing guy, the website guy, the production manager, the meal guy, the trainer. I was all the things. And I think that's kind of when the next wave of kind of what I could point to as a time in my life where there was an additional shift in my identity. I went from being the food guy to the developing a business guy. And I had to go through another kind of, because what I loved most about my business was being in it and connecting with the people. And there came a time when I had to get out of my business to work on my business. So I felt like I was isolated again. And I went from the nutrition guy to business development guy. It wasn't a big stretch for me in supporting a franchisee, because in my model, what we were doing is we were taking somebody who was struggling with their relationship with food. We're creating an organized strategy for them. We're supporting them every step of the way to their goal. So me supporting a franchise partner was very transferable. The skill was transferable. It's not like my model was wild, like accountability, support, education. That's not marketing for us. That's our operating model. So it made it that transaction to supporting franchise partners. The issue I had is I was not aware of the team it truly takes to support a franchise model. So it's like I was field support, opening specialist. I was franchise compliance, finance. I was everybody. So the world, I feel like, God's always kind of favoring this thing, like something's kind of bigger than me is at work here, because each one of those people organically showed up in my life. So the people who had that capacity and that competency, they came into my life. And I think it was because where my heart was postured in helping people drew that type of quality person to me. And then I became the guy pouring the belief into everybody else around me, into my team, rather than into our members. And, I partnered with some amazing franchise partners, as well as some not so great franchise partners, learned a lot of lessons in that. And then fast forward, it took us about 10 years to get to about 30 units. And then we started to get involved in kind of the franchise consulting world, where we could get in front of consultants. I could speak about my business. I could speak about some of the lessons in my business and where it's going. And then inside of 12 months after that, we've awarded over 100 territories. And we've built a amazing franchise development team, field support, HQ offices. I worked out of the backpack the whole time. And I know, smarter guys than me could have done this in half the time. But I think that the lessons learned really are worth, I think I appreciate the things I have to work the hardest for. And it's been a journey. And I feel like we have so much potential in front of us. I feel like our best days are ahead of us, but it was all the bumps in the road and the adversity and the learnings that gave me the strength to shoulder what I'm shouldering today. So like every other entrepreneur that's out there, there's levels to this thing, and there's seasons. And some seasons you feel like you're winning. They feel rare. And other seasons, like the one I'm in right now, it feels like the weight and the responsibility of leadership, effective communication, and all the things to support the system that we have in place today. It feels big. And when I'm in those seasons, then I have to reach for outside resources and people to hold me accountable and develop my mission and vision, because my business never grew once before I did. I had to invest in myself, and I had to see a bigger vision for myself. I had to educate myself in things that I am not confident in, so I could understand them, so I could find competent people to pay to do them. I think that every business owner has navigated miles of challenges with cash flow and people, and leadership is. I thought that it was initially. I thought it was people liked me, so they wanted to do what I was doing. I was like, that was level one of leadership. And then, at this point in leadership, most of the time it's me bringing the bad news so that we can protect the culture of the business and the member experience and the strength of the system and what everybody is investing in communities across the entire country. So I think that there's many kind of challenges in that, because most people, and I would say as a leader, as a young leader, I wanted to be liked. And now, if all of our partners are winning and they want to throw rocks at me, that's fine. I can sleep at night. I think it's about holding accountable to what we all agreed upon is the most critical part of our mission. And 75% of Americans in the US are struggling with, they're categorized as overweight or obese, but the more kind of heartbreaking metric is 1 in 5 of our children. So you see it at the grocery store. You see mom walking down the aisle who's maybe struggling with her health, and the little child who doesn't even know the weight of what they're carrying and how it's going to impact their life. And so there's a real need for what we do. And it's like, we are a high performing franchise in our system, does about the same average revenue as a low performing McDonald's. So it make it my mission to go out into every city in the United States and maybe beyond and take out one McDonald's. I feel like that would be an incredibly rewarding journey for myself and others that I'm on this with. And I think that's the kind of best piece of this. As I shared, the United States is in a very critical moment, and health, it has to be at the forefront. And it's not going to be about pounds anymore. Moving forward in the future, it's going to be about health span. And we shouldn't ignore, even though we know the statistics of 75% of Americans, 1 in 5 children, that there has been a huge push of medical weight loss. Even when I started hearing about medical weight loss and Ozempic, as a food franchisor, I got a little bit nervous. But as the data comes out, one of the challenges in that is that medical weight loss has a huge impact on skeletal muscle mass. Skeletal muscle mass is the number one indicator of health span, how long you're going to live. So nutrient dense, high protein meals aren't optional. They're essential. And as I started to develop this business, I just want to touch back a little bit, because what elevated this business was people, and it was putting the right people next to me. So I know that at every season of my life, somebody came along that believed. And I think that if you're a franchisor and you got people that believe in you, find a way to put them on your team. Because I have the most incredible team that supports this entire system. And moving forward, whether you're someone whom is maybe facing a challenge in your health, your relationship with food, you want to look better, feel better, perform better, you can always look up Project LeanNation, because I'm sure if there's not one there yet, it's on the way. And we are kind of core differentiator. Everybody can put a box of food on your doorstep, freshly factor, but where they end is where we begin. We're everything beyond the meal: support, accountability. We utilize a technology that takes daily intentions and turns it into measurable wins. And we support you with a coach that knows your name. That being said, if that's so interesting to you that franchising is interesting to you, you can also find all of that information at projectleannation.com. And there's a full kind of bio on the kind of people we're looking for, the people we'd love to connect with, the communities we'd love to serve. And if you're just looking to connect with me personally, I'm on Instagram at PLNTim.
21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.